The stars stretched endlessly across the blackness of space, their light faint and distant. For centuries, humanity had looked up at the night sky with a mixture of wonder and fear. They had built rockets, sent probes to other planets, and even established colonies on nearby moons. Yet, despite all their progress, Earth remained strangely alone. It wasn't just that no alien species had visited them, it was more than that. Every known intelligent race in the galaxy seemed to avoid Earth's boundaries, as though an invisible wall surrounded it. No one knew why. Some scientists believed it was superstition. Others thought it might be some ancient warning left behind by long-forgotten civilizations. Whatever the reason, humanity had grown used to its isolation. Commander Rachel Hayes stood silently on the bridge of the Eclipse, her eyes scanning the view screen. The ship was small compared to others in Earth's fleet, but it was fast and equipped with the latest sensors. Its mission was simple: patrol the edge of Earth's boundary, the invisible line that marked where human-claimed space ended and the unknown began. Rachel had been assigned to this post for 3 years now, and not once had she seen anything unusual. Until today. The crew worked quietly around her, their movements efficient and practiced. Lieutenant Daniel Carter sat at the tactical station, his fingers gliding over the controls as he monitored the ship's defenses. Ensign Laura Bennett, barely out of the academy, manned the sensor array. Her youthful enthusiasm often clashed with the seriousness of her role, but Rachel had come to appreciate her sharp mind. Together they formed a team capable of handling whatever the void might throw at them. "Anything new?" Rachel asked, breaking the silence. Laura shook her head. "Nothing unusual, Commander. Just the usual background radiation and a few stray asteroids." Rachel nodded, though her gaze never left the screen. Something felt off today, though she couldn't quite put her finger on it. Maybe it was the quiet. Space was always silent. Of course, but there was a different kind of stillness now, a heaviness in the air that made her uneasy. Suddenly, the ship's sensors flared to life. A series of blips appeared on the screen, moving rapidly toward Earth's boundary. Laura's eyes widened as she processed the data. "Commander, we've got multiple contacts approaching. Large ships bigger than anything I've ever seen." Rachel stepped closer, her heart pounding. "How many?" "At least 50, Laura replied, her voice trembling slightly. "They're not broadcasting any identification signals." Daniel turned in his seat, his expression grim. "Could be pirates, but they're too organized for that. This looks like a military formation." Rachel clenched her fists. Pirates were bad enough, but if this was an invasion force, they were in serious trouble. Earth's defenses were strong, but they weren't prepared for a full-scale attack from an advanced alien species. Not yet. "Raise shields and prepare weapons," Rachel ordered. "Laura, send a message to Earth Command. Tell them we've got unidentified vessels approaching our boundary." "Yes, Commander," Laura said, her fingers flying over the console. As the crew sprang into action, Rachel studied the incoming fleet. The ships were massive, their sleek designs unlike anything humanity had encountered before. They moved with precision, their formation tight and disciplined. Whoever, or whatever, they meant business. Minutes passed in tense silence as the fleet drew closer. Finally, when they were within range, the lead ship transmitted a signal. A holographic image flickered to life on the bridge, revealing a towering figure clad in ornate armor. His skin was a deep shade of purple, and his eyes glowed with an unnatural light. Behind him, rows of soldiers stood at attention, their weapons gleaming ominously. "I am Admiral Varnock of the Krylosian Empire," the figure announced, his voice booming through the ship. "You are trespassing on territory claimed by my people. Surrender your resources and we will spare your lives." Rachel stared at the hologram, her mind racing. The Krylosians were a name whispered in fear among Earth's xenologists. Their empire spanned dozens of star systems, and their armies were legendary for their brutality. But what was most shocking was the fact that they had crossed Earth's boundary, a line no other species dared approach. "We don't want trouble," Rachel said, keeping her tone steady despite the knot of fear tightening in her chest. "This Is human claimed space. Leave now or we'll defend ourselves. Varnok's lips curled into a sneer. Defend yourselves? Against the might of the Krylosian Empire? You are nothing but primitives clinging to a speck of dust in the cosmos. Your resistance is futile. Before Rachel could respond, the transmission cut off. The Krylosian fleet continued advancing, their weapons powering up. Commander, they're charging weapons, Laura shouted. Rachel's mind raced. Engaging such a powerful enemy would mean certain death for her crew, and possibly for Earth itself. But allowing them to breach the boundary unchallenged would set a dangerous precedent. She needed a plan, and fast. Daniel, target their lead ship, she ordered. If we can disable it, maybe we can buy some time. Aye, Commander, Daniel replied, his hands moving swiftly over the controls. Rachel turned to Laura. Keep trying to reach Earth Command. We need reinforcements, and we need them now. As the Eclipse maneuvered into position, Rachel couldn't shake the feeling that something bigger was at play here. Why had the Krylosians risked crossing Earth's boundary after centuries of avoidance? What did they want so badly that they were willing to provoke a fight? The answer came moments later, when Laura gasped. Commander, I'm picking up energy. Readings from their ships, they're scanning the planet, specifically the polar regions. Rachel frowned. What's down there? I don't know, Laura admitted. But whatever it is, they seem obsessed with it. Rachel's stomach churned. Earth's polar regions were home to ancient ruins discovered decades ago. Scientists had never fully understood their purpose, but they suspected they were tied to the mysterious barriers that surrounded the planet. If the Krylosians were after those ruins, then humanity's isolation might have been protecting them from far greater dangers than anyone realized. Hold steady, Rachel said, gripping the railing as the Eclipse shuddered under the weight of the enemy's firepower. We're not letting them get what they came for. The battle erupted around them, plasma bolts streaking through the darkness as the two sides exchanged fire. The Eclipse was outmatched, but Rachel refused to give up. Every second counted. Every shot fired brought Earth Command closer to responding. And somewhere deep inside she hoped against hope that humanity's greatest secret would remain safe, for now. The battle raged on, the silence of space broken only by the flashes of plasma fire and the hum of energy weapons. The Eclipse twisted and turned, its small size making it a difficult target for the Krylosian fleet. But even with its agility, the ship couldn't withstand the relentless assault forever. Shields flickered dangerously low, and alarms blared across the bridge as systems began to fail. Rachel gripped the railing tightly, her knuckles white. She watched as Daniel fired another volley of missiles at the lead Krylosian ship. The explosion lit up the view screen, but the enemy vessel barely flinched. Its armor was too thick, its shields too strong. The gap in technology between Earth's forces and the Krylosians was painfully obvious. Shields are down to 20%, Laura called out, her voice trembling. If they hit us again, we're done. Rachel clenched her jaw. Keep evading, we can't afford to take another direct hit. The crew worked frantically, their movements sharp and precise. Laura rerouted power from non-essential systems to keep the shields online, while Daniel adjusted the targeting algorithms to improve their chances of landing a critical blow. Despite their efforts, the situation was dire. The Krylosians were toying with them, testing their defenses before delivering the final strike. As the Eclipse banked sharply to avoid another barrage, Admiral Varnok's voice crackled over the comms once more. Your resistance is admirable but futile. Surrender now, and I may grant your crew mercy. Rachel hesitated. Mercy from the Krylosians was likely an empty promise. Stories of their conquests painted a grim picture, worlds stripped of resources, populations enslaved or exterminated. There would be no quarter given, no leniency shown, but surrendering wasn't an option either. If they gave up now, the Krylosians would have free reign over Earth's secrets and possibly its destruction. We won't surrender, Rachel replied, her voice firm despite the chaos around her. You've made a mistake coming here. Leave, now or you'll regret it. Varnok chuckled, a cold and humorless sound. Regret? You misunderstand your position. Your planet is nothing but a resource to be claimed. Your defiance means nothing. The transmission ended abruptly, leaving Rachel seething. She glanced at her crew. They were exhausted, their faces pale with fear and strain. But they hadn't given up yet, and neither would she. "Laura, focus on those energy readings you detected earlier," Rachel ordered. "If they're scanning the polar regions, there has to be a reason. Find out what they're looking for." "Yes, Commander," Laura said, her fingers flying over the console. She pulled up the data, her brow furrowing as she analyzed it. "It's strange. Their scans are concentrated on specific coordinates near the Arctic Circle. There's something buried there, something big." Daniel looked up from his station. "Could it be one of the ancient ruins?" Rachel nodded. "That's what I'm thinking. Those ruins have been a mystery for decades. Maybe the Krylosians know something we don't." Laura frowned. "But why now? Why cross Earth's boundary after centuries of avoiding it?" Rachel didn't have an answer. Whatever the reason, it was clear the Krylosians weren't acting on impulse. This attack was calculated, deliberate. They had come prepared, and they weren't leaving without what they wanted. As the Eclipse continued to evade the enemy fleet, Laura suddenly gasped. "Commander, I've found something. Their ships are transmitting encrypted data packets. It's faint, but I think I can decrypt it." "Do it," Rachel said. "We need every advantage we can get." Laura worked quickly, her eyes darting across the screen as lines of code scrolled past. Minutes felt like hours as the battle raged on outside. Finally, she let out a triumphant cry. "I've got it. It's not complete, but it's enough to piece together part of the picture." "What does it say?" Rachel asked, stepping closer. "It's intel about their empire," Laura explained. "They're facing internal unrest, a rebellion among the worlds they've conquered. They need resources to crush it, or risk losing control of their territory." Rachel's mind raced. So that was it. The Krylosians weren't just here to plunder Earth, they were desperate. Their empire was crumbling, and they saw Earth as a lifeline. That knowledge gave her an idea. "Daniel, prepare a message to Earth Command," Rachel said. "Tell them what we've learned. If we play this right, we might be able to turn their desperation against them." Daniel nodded and began typing. Meanwhile, Rachel turned back to Laura. "Can you isolate any vulnerabilities in their ships? Weak points we can exploit?" "I'll try," Laura said, already pulling up schematics of the enemy vessels. Their weapon systems seem to rely heavily on centralized power cores. "If we can disable those, we might stand a chance," Rachel finished. "Good work. Keep at it." The Eclipse shuddered violently as another blast rocked the ship. Lights flickered, and sparks flew from a nearby console. Rachel steadied herself, her heart pounding. They were running out of time. "Message sent," Daniel reported. "Earth Command should receive it soon." "Good," Rachel said. "Now let's see if we can buy ourselves a little breathing room." She turned her attention back to the view screen, watching as the Krylosian fleet regrouped. Their formation tightened, preparing for another assault. Rachel knew they couldn't keep this up much longer. The Eclipse was battered, its systems failing. But she also knew that giving up wasn't an option. "Laura, how's the decryption coming?" Rachel asked. "Almost there," Laura replied, her voice strained with concentration. "Just a few more seconds." Suddenly, the ship jolted again, throwing everyone off balance. An alarm blared, louder and more urgent than before. "Hull breach in Section 3, Daniel shouted. "Sealing bulkheads." Rachel cursed under her breath. They were taking damage faster than they could repair it. At this rate, they wouldn't last another 10 minutes. "Got it," Laura exclaimed, her face lighting up. "Commander, I found something important. The Krylosians aren't just scanning the ruins, they're trying to access them. Whatever's buried there, it's tied to Earth's barriers." Rachel's stomach churned. The barriers had always been a mystery, their origins unknown. Scientists believed they were created by an ancient civilization to protect Earth, but no one had ever been able to prove it. If the Krylosians succeeded in accessing them, we can't let that happen, Rachel said firmly. "Daniel, target their scanning equipment. Disable it if you can." "Aye, Commander," Daniel replied, adjusting the weapon systems. The Eclipse surged forward, dodging enemy fire as it closed in on the lead Krylosian ship. With a well-placed shot, Daniel managed to destroy one of their scanners. The Krylosians retaliated immediately, their attacks growing more aggressive. "They're not happy," Daniel muttered, wiping sweat from his brow. "No kidding," Rachel said, gripping the railing as the ship shook again. "Laura, anything else useful in that data?" Laura nodded. "Yes, Commander. It looks like their command structure relies heavily on Admiral Varnock. If we can neutralize him..." Rachel's eyes narrowed. Taking out Varnock wouldn't end the invasion, but it might throw the Krylosians into disarray long enough for Earth Command to arrive. "Do it," she said. "Find a way to isolate his ship." Laura worked quickly, her fingers flying over the console. "I've identified a weak point in their formation. If we lure them into position, we can trap Varnock's ship and disable." It's risky," Daniel said, glancing at Rachel. "But it might be our only shot." Rachel took a deep breath. Risky or not, they had to try. "Execute the plan," she ordered. "Let's make sure the Krylosians regret crossing Earth's boundary." The crew sprang into action, their movements synchronized despite the chaos around them. The Eclipse maneuvered into position, drawing the enemy fleet closer. As the Krylosians closed in, Rachel gave the order to fire. Plasma bolts streaked through space, striking the lead ship and forcing it into the trap. For a moment, everything seemed to hang in the balance. Then, with a deafening explosion, Varnock's ship was enveloped in flames. The rest of the fleet faltered, their formation breaking as confusion spread. "We did it," Laura whispered, her voice filled with disbelief. "For now," Rachel said, her expression grim. "But this isn't over, not by a long shot." As the Eclipse had limped away from the battlefield, Rachel couldn't shake the feeling that they had only delayed the inevitable. The Krylosians would return, and next time, they wouldn't be so easily deterred. Whatever secrets Earth held, humanity needed to uncover them, and fast. Because in the vastness of space, ignorance was no longer an option. The Eclipse drifted through space, its battered hull a testament to the battle it had just endured. Smoke filled the corridors, and the hum of failing systems echoed through the ship. Despite the damage, the crew worked tirelessly to keep the vessel operational. Rachel stood on the bridge, her eyes fixed on the view screen as the remnants of the Krylosian fleet retreated into the void. For now, they had won, but the cost was high. "Damage report," Rachel ordered, her voice steady despite the exhaustion, weighing her down. Daniel glanced up from his console. "Shields are offline, engines are at 30% capacity, and we've got multiple hull breaches. Life support is holding, but barely." Laura added, "We lost 2 crew members in the last attack, another 5 are injured." Rachel closed her eyes for a moment, letting the weight of those losses sink in. She knew every name, every face aboard the Eclipse. Losing even one was too much, but there was no time to grieve. The Krylosians would regroup, and when they returned, humanity needed to be ready. "Send a full status update to Earth Command," Rachel said. "Include everything we've learned about the Krylosians, their internal unrest, their focus on the polar regions, and their desperation for resources." "Yes, Commander," Laura replied, already typing furiously. Rachel turned her attention to Daniel. "How long until we can jump to faster than light speed?" "Not soon enough," Daniel admitted. "With the engine damage, it'll take at least 12 hours to stabilize the core. Until then, we're sitting ducks." Rachel nodded grimly. 12 hours was an eternity in their current state. If the Krylosians decided to double back, the Eclipses wouldn't stand a chance. Still, they had no choice but to wait. Pushing the engines too hard could leave them stranded in deep space, and that was a risk she couldn't afford to take. As the crew worked to repair the ship, Rachel's thoughts kept returning to the data Laura had decrypted. The Krylosians weren't just after Earth's resources. They were searching for something buried beneath the ice, something tied to the ancient barriers that surrounded the planet. Whatever it was, it held answers humanity desperately needed. Hours later, the eclipse finally limped into orbit around Earth. The planet below was a swirling mass of blues and greens, its beauty undiminished by the chaos unfolding above. Rachel contacted General Matthew Owens, head of planetary defense, and requested an immediate briefing. Within minutes, she and her crew were transported to Earth Command, a sprawling underground facility designed to coordinate humanity's defenses. General Owens greeted them with a mix of relief and concern. A tall man with graying hair and sharp features, he exuded authority without being overbearing. He listened intently as Rachel recounted the events of the battle, his expression growing darker with each detail. "So the Krylosians are targeting the polar regions," Owen said, pacing the room. "Do we have any idea what they're looking for?" Rachel shook her head. "Not yet, but based on their scans, it's tied to the ancient ruins near the Arctic Circle. And if it's connected to the barriers..." Owen stopped pacing and turned to face her. "Then we might be dealing with more than just an invasion. This could be about control." The room fell silent as the implications sank in. The barriers had protected Earth for centuries, shielding it from alien interference. If the Krylosians managed to access whatever lay beneath the ice, they could potentially dismantle those protections, or worse, use them against humanity. "We need to investigate," Rachel said firmly. "If the Krylosians know something we don't, we can't afford to stay in the dark." Owens nodded. "Agreed. I'll assemble a team to examine the ruins. In the meantime, you and your crew will assist Dr. Samuel Green, our top xenobiologist. He's been studying the barriers for years and may have insights that can help us." Rachel exchanged glances with Daniel and Laura. Neither looked thrilled at the prospect of diving into freezing temperatures while the threat of another attack loomed overhead. But they didn't argue. They understood the stakes. The next morning, Rachel, Daniel, Laura, and Dr. Samuel Green boarded a transport shuttle bound for the Arctic Circle. The journey was long and uncomfortable, but no one complained. As they approached their destination, the landscape below transformed into an endless expanse of white, broken only by jagged peaks and frozen rivers. Samuel, a wiry man in his late 50s with glasses perched on his nose, leaned forward eagerly as the shuttle descended. "This is it," he said, his voice tinged with excitement. The key to understanding the barriers might finally be within reach. Once they landed, the team suited up in thermal gear and made their way to the excavation site. The ruins were partially buried beneath layers of ice, their crystalline structures glinting faintly in the sunlight. Strange symbols covered the surfaces, their meanings lost to time. "This is where the Krylosians were scanning," Laura said, consulting her tablet. "Their energy readings peaked right here." Samuel knelt beside one of the structures, running, his gloved hand over the smooth surface. "Fascinating. These markings resemble patterns found in other ancient artifacts across the galaxy. Whoever built these barriers was part of a larger network, a civilization far older and more advanced than anything we've encountered." Rachel crouched beside him. "Can you decipher them?" "It'll take time," Samuel admitted. "But if I'm right, these symbols contain instructions for activating or disabling the barriers entirely." Daniel frowned. "You mean we could turn them off? Wouldn't that leave us exposed?" "Or we could use them as a weapon," Laura suggested. "If the barriers can repel invaders, maybe we can amplify their effects to drive the Krylosians away." Samuel nodded thoughtfully. "It's possible, but tampering with this kind of technology is dangerous. One wrong move and we could collapse the entire system, or worse." Rachel straightened, her mind racing. Time was not on their side. The Krylosians would return, and when they did, humanity needed to be ready. "We don't have a choice," she said firmly. "If this is our best shot at defending Earth, we have to take it." For the next several hours, the team worked tirelessly to decode the symbols. Samuel led the effort, his expertise guiding them through the labyrinth of ancient language. Laura assisted by cross-referencing the patterns with known alien scripts, while Daniel monitored the perimeter for signs of trouble. Rachel coordinated their efforts, ensuring everyone stayed focused despite the biting cold. Progress was slow, frustratingly so. The symbols resisted easy interpretation, their meanings layered and complex. But just as exhaustion began to set in, Samuel let out a triumphant cry. "I've got it!" he exclaimed, holding up his tablet. "These instructions describe how to activate the barriers manually. It's risky, but it might work." Rachel stepped closer, studying the display. "What do we need to do?" "We'll have to access the central hub," Samuel explained. "It's buried deep beneath the ice. According to these diagrams, it's the source of the barrier's power." "How deep?" Daniel asked. "At least 50 meters," Samuel replied. "And it's heavily shielded. Getting inside won't be easy." Rachel glanced at her team. Each face reflected a mix of determination and apprehension. They had faced impossible odds before and won. She knew they could do it again. "Let's move," Rachel said. "We don't have much time." The descent into the ice was treacherous. Using specialized drills, the team carved a narrow tunnel downward, inch by painstaking inch. The temperature dropped with every meter and the air grew thinner. By the time they reached the central hub, their breaths came in ragged gasps, and frost clung to their suits. The hub itself was a massive chamber, its walls lined with glowing crystals that pulsed rhythmically. At its center stood a pedestal etched with the same symbols they had decoded above. Samuel approached it cautiously, his hands trembling as he input the sequence. "This is it," he whispered. "If I'm right, activating this will trigger the barriers." "And if you're wrong?" Daniel asked. Samuel hesitated. "Then we'll probably die." No one spoke as Samuel pressed the final symbol. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, with a deafening roar, the crystals erupted in a blinding light. The ground shook violently, nearly knocking the team off their feet. When the tremors subsided, the chamber was bathed in a soft, golden glow. "It worked," Laura breathed, her voice filled with awe. Outside, the sky darkened as the barriers flared to life. Waves of energy rippled outward, enveloping the planet in a shimmering dome. The Krylosian fleet, which had begun to reappear on the horizon, faltered under the surge. Their ships sputtered and died, their systems overwhelmed by the pulse. Rachel watched silently as the enemy withdrew, their retreat marked by flashes of light as they fled into the void. For the first time in days, she allowed herself to breathe. But even as relief washed over her, she knew the fight wasn't over. The barriers had bought them time, but the universe was vast and humanity's trials were far from finished. The golden glow of the barriers faded slowly, leaving behind a planet bathed in an eerie stillness. The Krylosian fleet had vanished, their retreat swift and silent. For now, Earth was safe, but the victory felt hollow. Rachel stood at the edge of the Arctic excavation site, her breath visible in the freezing air. She watched as the last remnants of the energy surge dissipated into the atmosphere. It was over, yet the weight of what they had done pressed heavily on her shoulders. Behind her, Samuel Green and Laura Bennett worked to secure the central hub, ensuring the ancient machinery remained stable. Daniel Carter patrolled the perimeter, his weapon drawn despite the absence of immediate threats. No one spoke much. The enormity of what they had accomplished and the risks they had taken left them all subdued. "We did it," Laura finally said, breaking the silence. Her voice was soft, almost hesitant. "The barriers are active again." Rachel nodded but didn't turn around. "For how long? And at what cost?" Samuel joined her, brushing frost from his gloves. "The activation drained a significant amount of power. If we need to use the barriers again anytime soon, we'll have to find a way to recharge them, or risk burning out the system entirely. That's assuming we can even control it next time," Daniel added, walking up to join the group. His expression was grim. "This thing wasn't built for humans to operate. We got lucky this time, but luck doesn't last forever." Rachel clenched her fists inside her gloves. They had gambled everything on a single shot, and while it had paid off, the questions lingered. Who had built these barriers? Why had they chosen Earth? And why had the Krylosians been so desperate to access them? The answers were buried deeper than the ice beneath their feet, and until they uncovered them, humanity would remain vulnerable. Back at Earth Command, General Owens convened an emergency meeting. The room was filled with high-ranking officers, scientists and government officials, all eager to understand what had happened and what came next. Rachel and her team delivered their report, detailing the battle, the activation of the barriers, and the Krylosians' retreat. The general listened intently, his expression unreadable. "So you're telling me," Owen said after a long pause, "that we've staved off an invasion using technology we don't fully understand, created by a civilization we know nothing about?" Rachel met his gaze without flinching. "Yes, sir. That's exactly what I'm saying." Owens leaned back in his chair, rubbing his temples. "This changes everything. The barriers have protected us for centuries, but now that we've tampered with them, there's no telling what consequences might follow." Samuel stepped forward, his tone measured but urgent. "The barriers aren't just shields, they're weapons. Their pulse destabilized the Krylosians' technology, forcing them to retreat. But if we want to use them effectively moving forward, we need to study them further, understand their limits, their weaknesses, and how to maintain them." "And if the Krylosians come back?" one of the officers asked. "What then?" "They will," Rachel said firmly. "Admiral Varnock made it clear they see Earth as a resource. Losing this battle won't stop them. It'll only make them angrier." The room fell silent as the reality of her words sank in. Humanity had won a temporary reprieve, but the war was far from over. The Krylosians were ruthless, disciplined, and technologically superior. When they returned, they would be better prepared and more dangerous. In the days that followed, Earth began to rebuild. The scars of the attack were everywhere. Cities damaged by stray plasma fire, families mourning loved ones lost in the conflict, and orbital defenses stretched thin. Yet amidst the destruction there was also hope. The activation of the barriers had proven that humanity could fight back, even against overwhelming odds. It was a fragile hope, but it was enough to keep people going. Rachel and her crew returned to the Eclipse, overseeing repairs while preparing for the inevitable return of the Krylosians. The shipyard buzzed with activity as engineers worked around the clock to patch up the battered vessel. New weapon systems were installed, and the engines were upgraded to handle faster-than-light travel under stress. Every improvement brought them closer to readiness, but not close enough. Meanwhile, Samuel and his team delved deeper into the mysteries of the barriers. They established a research station near the Arctic ruins, studying the crystalline structures and decoding more of the ancient symbols. Each discovery raised new questions. The barriers were older than anyone had imagined, their creators long gone, yet traces of their presence remained, in the ruins, in the symbols, and perhaps in the very fabric of Earth itself. Laura spent hours analyzing data alongside Samuel, her youthful enthusiasm tempered by the gravity of their task. "Do you think the builders meant for us to find this?" she asked one evening as they pored over schematics. Samuel shook his head. "It's hard to say. Maybe they intended the barriers to protect Earth indefinitely, or maybe they expected someone like us to step up when the time came. Either way," Laura said softly, "we're playing with forces we barely understand." Samuel smiled faintly. That's always been humanity's specialty, stepping into the unknown, even when we're terrified. As weeks turned into months, life on Earth settled into an uneasy routine. The barriers held firm, their golden glow occasionally flickering in response to minor fluctuations in space. Scientists monitored them closely, wary of any signs of instability. Meanwhile, Earth Command ramped up its efforts to bolster planetary defenses. New ships were commissioned and training programs for pilots and soldiers expanded rapidly. The message was clear. Humanity couldn't rely solely on ancient technology to save them. Rachel found herself caught between two worlds. On one hand, she was a soldier, tasked with leading missions and preparing for the next attack. On the other, she was part of something larger, a quest for knowledge that might determine humanity's future. The more she learned about the barriers, the more she realized how little they truly knew. One night as she stood on the observation deck of the eclipse, Daniel joined her. Neither spoke for a while, content to watch the stars through the reinforced glass. "You ever wonder what's out there?" Daniel asked eventually, nodding toward the void. "Beyond the barriers? Beyond Earth's boundaries?" "All the time," Rachel admitted. "But wondering won't get us anywhere. We need answers." Daniel chuckled. "You sound like Samuel." "He's right, though," Rachel said. "We can't afford to stay blind anymore. If the Krylosians taught us anything, it's that ignorance is a luxury we can't afford." Daniel nodded thoughtfully. "You think we'll ever figure it out? The barriers, the ruins, all of it?" "I don't know," Rachel replied honestly. "But we have to try, because if we don't, no one else will." Far beyond Earth's boundaries, Admiral Varnock stood aboard his flagship, his glowing eyes fixed on the star charts spread before him. The defeat at Earth's hands gnawed at him, a bitter reminder of his empire's fragility. He had underestimated the primitives, dismissed their capabilities as insignificant. Now, he knew better. "Begin. Repairs immediately," he ordered, his voice cold and commanding. "And send scouts to monitor Earth's defenses. I want to know everything about those barriers, their source, their limitations, and how to bypass them." His second-in-command hesitated. "Sir, our resources are stretched thin. Another assault may not be wise." Varnock's glare silenced him. "Wise or not, it is necessary. Earth holds the key to stabilizing our empire. Without it, we fall." The officer bowed and retreated, leaving Varnock alone with his thoughts. The primitives had surprised him once, but they wouldn't do, so again. Next time he would come prepared. Next time Earth would kneel, or burn. Back on the observation deck, Rachel stared into the darkness, her mind racing. The barriers had bought humanity time, but time alone wasn't enough. They needed strength, knowledge, and unity. More importantly, they needed to understand why Earth mattered, not just to the Krylosians, but to the universe itself. The stars shimmered faintly, distant and indifferent. Somewhere out there, forces greater than humanity waited, watching. Rachel didn't know what the future held, but one thing was certain: humanity would face it together, or not at all. The months passed slowly, each day bringing a mix of rebuilding and preparation. Earth had changed since the Krylosian attack. Cities once bustling with life now bore scars of destruction, their skylines marred by craters and shattered buildings. Billions of people mourned those lost in the conflict, yet amidst the grief, there was resilience. Humanity had stared into the abyss and survived, a fact that gave them both pride and purpose. Rachel Hayes stood on the bridge of the newly repaired Eclipse, watching as the ship underwent final testing before its next mission. The vessel was sleeker now, its systems upgraded to handle whatever challenges lay ahead. Around her, the crew moved with quiet determination, their focus sharp and unwavering. They were ready, or as ready as they could be. Earth Command had taken drastic measures in response to the Krylosian threat. New fleets were commissioned, and orbital defenses expanded to cover every corner of human-claimed space. Training programs for pilots and soldiers became more rigorous, pushing recruits to their limits. Even civilians contributed, volunteering for civil defense units or working in factories producing weapons and supplies. It wasn't just about survival anymore. It was about standing firm against an enemy that refused to back down. But despite these efforts, Rachel couldn't shake the feeling that humanity's preparations were insufficient. The Krylosians weren't ordinary invaders. They were conquerors driven by desperation and armed with technology far beyond anything Earth possessed. If they returned, it wouldn't be with a single fleet, but with an entire armada. And when that day came, Earth would need more than brute force to survive. Samuel Green spent most of his time at the Arctic Research Station, poring over data collected from the ancient ruins. His team worked tirelessly, deciphering symbols etched into crystalline structures and analyzing energy patterns emitted by the barriers. Each discovery brought them closer to understanding the truth, but also raised new questions. One evening, as Samuel sat alone in the dimly lit lab, He noticed something unusual in the readings. A faint signal pulsed intermittently within the barrier network, almost like a heartbeat. At first, he thought it might be interference caused by the activation process, but further analysis revealed something extraordinary. The signal contained information. "It's a message," Samuel whispered to himself, his voice trembling with excitement. He called Laura Bennett into the lab, eager to share his findings. "What kind of message?" Laura asked, peering over his shoulder at the screen. "I'm not sure yet," Samuel admitted. "But it's encoded in the same language as the symbols we've been studying. Whoever built the barriers left this behind, maybe as guidance, maybe as a warning." Laura frowned. "Do you think it's meant for us?" "It has to be," Samuel said. "Why else would it still be active after all this time?" Together they began decoding the signal, piecing together fragments of text that seemed to describe the barrier's origins. According to the message, the barriers hadn't been designed solely to protect Earth. They were part of a larger system spanning multiple planets. These worlds, scattered across the galaxy, had been designated as sanctuaries by their creators. The purpose? To preserve life in the event of catastrophic wars or disasters. The builders saw Earth as special, Samuel explained later during a briefing with Rachel and Daniel. They chose it as one of their sanctuaries because of its unique qualities, its biodiversity, its potential for growth. The barriers weren't just shields, they were meant to nurture life, to give it a chance to flourish without interference. Rachel absorbed the information silently. "So the Krylosians aren't just attacking us, they're targeting a sanctuary planet. That's why they're so desperate to access the barriers. They think Earth holds the key to stabilizing their empire." Samuel nodded. "Exactly. But if they succeed, it won't just endanger Earth, it could disrupt the entire sanctuary network. Other worlds might fall under their control." Daniel crossed his arms, his expression grim. "That makes stopping them even more important. But how do we fight an empire that sees us as expendable?" "We don't fight them head-on," Rachel said firmly. "We outsmart them. We use what we've learned about the barriers to turn their own tactics against them." Preparations intensified in the weeks that followed. Earth Command devised a bold plan based on Samuel's discoveries. The barriers could be manipulated to emit targeted pulses of energy, disrupting enemy technology while leaving Earth's defenses intact. This required precise calibration and a massive power source to sustain the effort. To achieve this, engineers constructed relay stations around the globe, linking them to the central hub beneath the Arctic ice. These stations acted as amplifiers, channeling energy from the barriers into directed bursts capable of disabling Krylosian ships. It was risky, but it offered humanity its best chance at survival. As the relays came online, Rachel led a reconnaissance mission to monitor Krylosian activity near Earth's boundary. The Eclipse patrolled the edge of the void, its sensors scanning for any sign of movement. Days turned into weeks, and tension mounted aboard the ship. The Krylosians hadn't returned yet, but everyone knew it was only a matter of time. Then, one night the alarms blared. Dozens of ships appeared on the horizon, their silhouettes unmistakable against the backdrop of stars. Admiral Varnock had arrived, with reinforcements. "Relay status?" Rachel asked sharply, her eyes locked on the view screen. "All stations operational," Laura replied, her hands flying over the console. "Energy levels are stable." "Good," Rachel said. "Prepare to activate the barriers on my mark." The Krylosian fleet advanced steadily, their formation tight and disciplined. Plasma bolts streaked through space as they opened fire, testing Earth's defenses. The Eclipse evaded their attacks, staying just out of range while relaying coordinates to the ground teams. "Commander, they're charging weapons," Daniel shouted, his tone urgent. "Hold steady," Rachel ordered. "Wait for it." Varnock's flagship loomed closer, its massive bulk dominating the battlefield. The Admiral's holographic image flickered to life on the bridge, his glowing eyes filled with contempt. "Your feeble resistance ends here, primitives. Surrender your world or face annihilation." Rachel met his gaze without flinching. "You made a mistake coming here, Varnock. Leave now or suffer the consequences. Varnock sneered. Consequences? From insects like you? Rachel didn't respond. Instead, she gave the order. Activate the barriers. Across the globe, the relay stations hummed to life, their energy surging toward the central hub. Moments later, a brilliant pulse erupted from the barriers, enveloping the Krylosian fleet in a wave of golden light. Ships sputtered and died, their systems overwhelmed by the surge. Varnock's flagship faltered, its shields collapsing under the strain. The Admiral's expression shifted from arrogance to shock. What is this sorcery? It's not sorcery, Rachel said coldly. It's the power of Earth, and you'll never take it. Varnock's image vanished as his ship retreated, followed by the remnants of his fleet. The battle was over, for now. In the aftermath, Earth celebrated cautiously. The victory was significant, but no one believed it marked the end of the conflict. The Krylosians would regroup, and when they returned, they would be stronger. Humanity's survival depended on continuing to adapt and innovate. Rachel stood on the observation deck of the Eclipse, gazing out at the stars. She thought about the barriers, the ruins, and the ancient civilization that had chosen Earth as a sanctuary. Their intentions remained unclear, but one thing was certain. Humanity owed them a debt, one they intended to honor. We've bought ourselves time, Rachel said softly, turning to Daniel and Laura. But the real fight is just beginning. Daniel nodded. And we'll be ready. Laura smiled faintly. Whatever happens, we'll face it together. Together, they watched as the sun rose over the horizon, casting its light across a battered but unbroken planet. The universe was vast and humanity's place in it uncertain. But for the first time in centuries, Earth was no longer alone. It had allies, not just among the stars, but within itself. And that, Rachel realized, was humanity's greatest strength.